The day my mother-in-law told my 8-year-old son to get out of her way and left him sitting alone on a crowded curb, a police officer was the one who found him first. She said he was too sensitive. She said he was making drama. What she did not expect was that within months, we would be standing in a courtroom, changing his last name and ending her rights for good. My name is Rowan Whitmore, and this is the story of the day I realized my child was never optional. Chapter 1. Left on the Curb. Brenda called at 8:12 on the morning of the 4th of July while I was standing at our kitchen island slicing strawberries for the fruit salad I always bring to the block barbecue. The sun was already pouring through the windows, hot and bright, promising one of those heavy Illinois afternoons where the air feels thick by noon. Caleb was upstairs brushing his teeth, humming off-key, already dressed in his navy t-shirt with the tiny embroidered flag over the pocket. He had been looking forward to the parade for weeks. Brenda's voice was cheerful, almost syrupy. She said she was heading downtown early to claim a good spot along Main Street and asked if she could take Caleb with her. Carter and Brooklyn were already in the car. She said it would be easier if the cousins were together and that Andrew and I could meet them later by the food trucks. I hesitated. I always hesitated with Brenda. 2 months earlier, at a family dinner, she had watched Caleb struggle to finish his plate and said he was too sensitive about everything, that boys needed to toughen up. She had laughed when he flinched at a loud firecracker in their neighborhood last summer and told him he was making a scene. The words had stuck with me, even if everyone else acted like they were harmless. Andrew looked up from rinsing blueberries in the sink. He raised his eyebrows in a silent question. I covered the phone with my hand and mouthed that his mom wanted to take Caleb early. He shrugged, not dismissive, just uncertain. "It's fine," he said quietly. "We'll be right behind them." I could not shake the feeling in my chest, a small tightness that told me to say no. But Caleb thundered down the stairs at that moment, sneakers squeaking on the hardwood, and asked if Grandma was here yet. His face was open and hopeful. I told Brenda yes. She said she would be there in 10 minutes. When the car pulled away with Caleb in the back seat between Carter and Brooklyn, I stood on the porch longer than I needed to. Andrew slid an arm around my waist and kissed the side of my head. He told me I was overthinking it, that it was just a parade, that his mom might be difficult, but she loved her grandchildren. We left the house about 40 minutes later. Downtown Naperville was already crowded when we parked 3 blocks away from Main Street. The air smelled like kettle corn and sunscreen. Music from the high school marching band echoed off the storefront windows. Children waved small flags and ran ahead of their parents. We made our way toward the spot Brenda had described, near the corner by the old brick bank building. I spotted Dennis first, standing stiffly with his arms crossed. Sabrina was next to him, scrolling on her phone, while Carter swung a plastic sword near her legs. Brooklyn had glitter on her cheeks and a balloon tied around her wrist. I scanned the sidewalk behind them. I did not see Caleb. "Where is he?" I asked, already stepping closer. Dennis shrugged like it was a minor inconvenience. Sabrina barely glanced up. Brenda pointed vaguely down the block and said he was back there somewhere. She said he had been slowing everyone down and whining about his shoe. She said he needed to sit for a minute and calm himself. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like I had missed a step on a staircase. "You left him back there?" I asked. She waved her hand as if I were overreacting. She said he was fine, that he just needed a break, that he had been making drama about a little blister. Andrew's fingers tightened around mine. He did not say anything. His jaw shifted once, a muscle jumping under the skin. I did not wait for another explanation. I turned and walked quickly down the sidewalk, scanning faces. The crowd thickened near a line of food trucks. I called Caleb's name once, then again, louder. The band started another song and the drums swallowed my voice. I found him sitting on the curb near a snow cone stand, knees pulled up to his chest. His small flag lay on the pavement beside him. A uniformed Naperville police officer stood a few feet away, crouched slightly so he was closer to Caleb's eye level. The officer looked up as I approached. He asked if this was my son. I nodded, breathless. He said he had noticed Caleb sitting alone for several minutes and wanted to make sure he wasn't lost. He said a man nearby had pointed him out, concerned that the boy looked upset. Caleb looked up at me and tried to smile. There were tear tracks on his cheeks, faint but visible. I dropped to my knees in front of him and asked if he was hurt. He shook his head and said he was fine. He said he didn't want to make it worse. His voice was so small that for a second I thought I had misheard him. The officer asked if everything was okay. I forced my voice steady and told him it was. I thanked him for checking. He gave Caleb one last look, something careful and assessing, then stood and moved back into the crowd. I asked Caleb what happened. He said his heel hurt and he couldn't keep up. He said Grandma told him to sit and think about how he was acting. He said she would come back when he was ready to stop making drama. The words landed like a slap. Andrew reached us then. He did not kneel right away. He stood there, taking in the scene, the curb, the half-melted snow cone near Caleb's foot, the space between where we were and where the rest of the family stood almost a block away. Andrew crouched slowly. He asked Caleb to look at him. He did, eyes glossy but determined not to cry. He said he was sorry. He said he should have just walked faster. Sorry for what? Andrew asked. For slowing everyone down, for being a problem. I felt something inside me snap into clarity. This was not just about a blister. This was about an 8-year-old boy who believed his pain was an inconvenience. I helped Caleb stand. He winced when he put weight on his right foot. Andrew picked up the small flag from the pavement and handed it back to him. We did not walk back toward Brenda immediately. We walked toward a bench under a maple tree where the crowd thinned. I took off Caleb's sneaker and saw the raw skin on his heel. It was worse than I had expected, red and already starting to swell. He must have been trying to ignore it for a while. "Why didn't you tell Grandma it hurt?" I asked gently. He looked down at his hands. He said he did. He said she told him he was always too sensitive and that boys his age did not cry over little things. He said she told him he was making drama in front of everyone. Andrew's face did not change dramatically. That was the part that scared me most. His expression went very still. He nodded once, as if confirming something in his mind. Across the street, I could see Brenda craning her neck, watching us. Sabrina leaned toward her, whispering something. Dennis remained where he was, arms folded. Andrew stood up. He told me to stay with Caleb. He walked back toward his parents alone. I could not hear the words exchanged over the noise of the parade, but I saw Brenda's hands fly up in exaggerated exasperation. I saw Andrew shake his head once. I saw Sabrina step forward, then stop when Andrew did not engage with her. After a minute, Andrew turned back toward us. He did not look angry in the loud, explosive way I might have expected. He looked precise. "We are leaving," he said simply. Brenda called after us. She said we were being ridiculous. She said it was just a parade. She said Caleb needed to learn resilience. Caleb flinched at the sound of her voice. As we walked away, Andrew matched his steps to Caleb's slower pace without even thinking about it. He did not rush him. He did not comment on the limp. He just stayed close, one hand hovering at Caleb's back. Halfway to the car, Caleb tugged on my sleeve. He leaned in so only I could hear him. "Grandma said I always make drama," he whispered. I felt Andrew pause beside us. He had heard it too. He did not say anything right then. He just looked down at our son, then up at me. Something had shifted behind his eyes, something final and unmistakable. If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you. Chapter 2. Too sensitive. The drive home was quiet in a way that felt heavier than shouting would have. Caleb leaned against the passenger side door in the back seat, his small jaw set tight, determined not to let any sound escape. Andrew kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other resting loosely near the center console, like he was bracing for something he could not yet see. When we pulled into our driveway in Naperville, the fireworks had already started somewhere in the distance. Pops and cracks echoed across the neighborhood, sharp and celebratory. Caleb flinched at the first one, but said nothing. Inside, I led him straight to the kitchen and lifted him onto the counter like I had done when he was a toddler. His heel looked worse under the bright overhead light. The skin had peeled back in one corner, and I could see where dirt from the sidewalk had pressed into the rawness. I grabbed the first aid kit from the cabinet and poured antiseptic over a cotton pad. "This might sting a little," I told him softly. He nodded before I even finished the sentence, shoulders stiff, hands gripping the edge of the counter. When the antiseptic touched the blister, his whole body tensed, but he did not cry out. He did not even pull his foot away. "You can make a sound," I said gently. He shook his head. "I should have just walked." The words were quiet, almost rehearsed. "You were hurt," I said. "Walking faster would not have fixed that." He stared at the cabinet doors behind me, not meeting my eyes. I was slowing them down. Andrew stood near the sink, arms folded tightly across his chest. He had not taken off his shoes yet. His gaze never left Caleb's face. "You were not slowing anyone down," Andrew said. "You were 8 years old with a blister." Caleb shrugged slightly, like that detail did not matter. He said Grandma said boys his age do not cry about little things. He said she told him he was making drama in front of strangers. My hand paused midair. The cotton pad hovered inches from his skin. For a brief second, a memory flickered across my mind, so fast I almost missed it. I was 9, standing in my childhood kitchen in Peoria, telling my own mother that a classmate had laughed at me in front of everyone. She had sighed and said I was being dramatic, that I needed thicker skin. I remember swallowing whatever I was about to say next. I pushed the memory away. Caleb did not need my history layered onto his pain. "You are allowed to feel pain," I told him. "You are allowed to say something hurts." He nodded, but the doubt was still there, small and stubborn. After I wrapped his heel in clean gauze and helped him down from the counter, he went upstairs to change into pajamas. I heard the soft creak of his bedroom door closing. Andrew remained in the kitchen, unmoving. He walked into the living room and stopped in front of the bookshelf where we kept framed photos. One of them was from his college graduation. Brenda stood on one side of him, hand proudly gripping his arm. Dennis on the other side with a rare smile. Andrew picked up the frame and studied it for a long moment. He did not look angry. He looked tired. "She's still my mom," he said quietly. I did not answer right away. I knew that sentence held more weight than it sounded like. He set the frame back down carefully, aligning it with the edge of the shelf. "But she doesn't get to hurt my son." The way he said it made the air in the room feel sharper. He pulled his phone from his pocket. "We are not letting this slide," he said. Within minutes, we had Brenda on speakerphone. Dennis answered from their house, the television loud in the background. Sabrina's voice drifted in as well, slightly amused, like she was waiting for entertainment. Andrew kept his tone level. He described what had happened, the distance between Caleb and the rest of them, the police officer who had approached him, the stranger who had noticed him sitting alone. Brenda let him finish before responding. She said we were exaggerating. She said Caleb had been safe the entire time. She said she could see him from where she was standing. "That was not true," Andrew said calmly. "He was almost a block away." "He was throwing a fit about his shoe," she replied. "I told him to sit for a minute and collect himself." "He was in pain," I said. "He had a blister." "It was a little blister, Rowan. Boys get blisters. Boys learn to walk through them." Sabrina laughed softly in the background. "He's always sensitive. He takes everything personally." Dennis cleared his throat but did not contradict anyone. Andrew asked a simple question. "If he had walked into traffic while you were not looking, what then?" Brenda scoffed. "That's ridiculous." "So was leaving him alone in a crowd," Andrew said. There was a brief silence, followed by Brenda's voice sharpening. "You two are acting like we abandoned him on the side of a highway. It was a parade. Families were everywhere." "He was 8, Andrew said. "He needs to toughen up," Brenda replied. "The world is not going to bend around his feelings." The words settled into the space between us, cold and deliberate. Andrew took a slow breath. "From now on, Caleb will not be spending time with you without us present." "You can't be serious," Brenda said. I'm very serious. Sabrina's tone shifted from amused to defensive. You're cutting Mom off over one afternoon? Over one afternoon where my son was left alone and taught that his pain is an inconvenience. Brenda's patience snapped. He's not even blood, she blurted. You're choosing a child who's not even your own over your own mother. The sentence hung in the air, heavier than anything else she had said. For a second, I forgot to breathe. Andrew did not raise his voice. He did not curse. He did not even sound surprised. He is my son, he said evenly, and this conversation is over. He ended the call before Brenda could respond. The house felt different afterward, like something invisible had been pulled loose from the foundation. Andrew stood there with the phone still in his hand, staring at the dark screen. I'm done, he said quietly. For now, we are done. For now? I repeated. He nodded once. No visits, no calls, nothing until I decide what this looks like long term. Upstairs, I heard Caleb's bedroom door open slightly, then close again. He probably heard at least part of it. Andrew walked to the kitchen table and sat down. He opened his laptop, fingers moving with controlled precision. What are you doing? I asked. Finding a family law attorney in DuPage County, he said. I watched him scroll through names and reviews, pausing occasionally to read details about custody cases and visitation disputes. He was not reacting in anger. He was building something, piece by piece. This is bigger than a fight, he said. If she thinks she can show up at a parade and leave him alone, she'll push further. I want to know exactly what our rights are before she does. Outside, another burst of fireworks cracked across the sky. The sound rolled through the neighborhood, bright and celebratory. Andrew clicked on the contact page of a law firm in downtown Naperville and started typing an email.
If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you.
Chapter 3. Public Receipts. By the next morning, the fallout had already begun. I was pouring coffee when my phone buzzed with 3 notifications in a row. Facebook. I almost ignored them. I wish I had. Brenda had posted publicly sometime after midnight. The post was long, dramatic, carefully worded to sound wounded instead of reckless. She wrote about how painful it was when children forget who raised them. She wrote about loyalty and blood, and how modern marriages tear families apart. She never used my name, but she did not need to. She wrote that Andrew had changed, that he was being manipulated, that real family matters more than feelings. Underneath, comments were stacking up. Sabrina had already replied with a heart emoji and something about protecting elders. Aunt Marjorie commented that misunderstandings should be handled privately, not with hostility. My stomach tightened. Andrew walked into the kitchen and saw my face before I said anything. What happened? I turned the phone toward him. He read silently. His expression did not explode into anger. It went cold. She did this publicly, he said. Within minutes, my phone buzzed again, a private message from Aunt Marjorie. You are overreacting. Brenda would never endanger a child. This could have been handled without humiliating her. I stared at the word humiliating. Another notification. A cousin I barely speak to commented directly under Brenda's post that it was heartbreaking when wives isolate husbands from their mothers. He wrote that some women see competition where there is none. Andrew let out a slow breath. That is not about the parade, he said. That is a narrative. We refreshed the post. The paragraph about Caleb sitting alone was gone. Brenda had edited it. She removed any mention of him being separated from the group. Now it read as if he had chosen to sit while everyone else watched the parade together. Andrew laughed once under his breath, sharp and humorless. She is rewriting it in real time. Before either of us could respond, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from a cousin named Rachel. I screenshotted it before she deleted. Call me if you need it. She sent me an image. It was the original version of Brenda's post, time-stamped with the line about Caleb sitting by himself because he was slowing them down. I felt something steady inside me. Not rage, clarity. Andrew did not hesitate. He opened his banking app. "Are you sure?" I asked. "She wants this public," he said. "Fine." He pulled up 5 years of transfers every month from January 2019 through June 2024, $1,335, mortgage support, utilities, insurance, consistent, traceable. "You do not have to," I said quietly. He looked at me. "She is telling the world I abandoned family. Let us talk about what family has looked like." He drafted a post. It was shorter than hers. "Since we're discussing family publicly, here are the numbers. From 2019 through 2024, I transferred $1,335 per month to my parents. That totals nearly $81,000. We did this willingly. We did this consistently. Yesterday, my 8-year-old son was left alone on a public sidewalk during a crowded parade. A police officer approached him because he was unattended. That is not a misunderstanding." He attached screenshots of the transfers, date stamps visible, account names visible, no insults, no adjectives, just facts. Before he hit post, he looked at me once. "Ready?" I nodded. He posted it. The shift was not immediate. For the first few minutes, there was silence. Then 1 comment, then 3, then 10. One of the same relatives who had criticized me wrote that he had not known Andrew had been supporting Brenda and Dennis financially. He said that context mattered. Another cousin wrote that leaving a child alone at a crowded event was unacceptable, no matter what the circumstances were. Aunt Marjorie deleted her earlier comment. Brenda did not respond at first. Then, 30 minutes later, she edited her original post again. This time, she removed the paragraph about loyalty and replaced it with a vague statement about how money does not equal love. Rachel texted again. She's panicking. I refreshed the page. Dennis had not commented at all. Sabrina, however, wrote that Andrew was airing private matters to embarrass their mother. She said financial support does not give anyone the right to dictate how children are raised. Andrew replied once. "No one dictated anything. I asked why my child was left alone." He did not engage further. By late afternoon, the comments had turned. A family friend wrote that he admired Andrew for protecting his son. Someone else wrote that being sensitive is not a flaw in a child. Then Brenda posted a story, not on her main feed, on her story, temporary, harder to track. Rachel caught that too. The story read that some women keep children from their real grandparents to prove a point, that children deserve their blood family. I stared at the word blood. Andrew saw it over my shoulder. "She can't help herself," he said. That night, after Caleb went to bed, Andrew and I sat at the kitchen table again. The laptop remained open where he had searched for attorneys the night before. "We need to know what she can legally do," I said. He nodded. The next morning, we met Claire Donnelly at her office in downtown Naperville. She was in her early 40s, direct without being cold. Her office walls were lined with framed certificates and photos of DuPage County courthouses. She listened without interrupting while Andrew described the parade. He mentioned the police officer, he mentioned the distance, he mentioned Caleb's words. Claire leaned back in her chair. "Illinois does allow grandparents to petition for visitation in certain circumstances, but it's not automatic. They have to prove a substantial relationship and that denying visitation harms the child." She folded her hands. Leaving an 8-year-old alone in a crowded public event is not going to help her case. Andrew asked what would happen if Brenda filed anyway. Claire said the court would examine the nature of the relationship, the child's best interest, and any evidence of endangerment. "Child endangerment changes everything," she calmly said. I felt Andrew's leg press against mine under the table. Claire continued. "If she pushes for visitation, we respond with documentation, the police interaction, the school records if anything further happens. The financial support is irrelevant legally, but it speaks to credibility." Andrew asked whether we should preemptively file anything. Claire shook her head. "Not yet. Right now, you document, you set boundaries. If she escalates, we're prepared." On the drive home, the sky was gray and heavy, the earlier sunshine gone. "You think she'll escalate?" I asked. Andrew kept his eyes on the road. She made it public, he said. She made it about blood. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Aunt Marjorie. This has gone too far. I stared at the words. For the first time since the parade, I felt resolved. If she pushes this, Andrew quietly said, it will not end the way she thinks.
If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you.
Chapter 4. The School Incident. 2 weeks later, the call came while I was in the middle of a budget review meeting at the hospital. My phone vibrated against the conference table, the screen lighting up with the name Bright Horizons Summer Program. For a split second, I told myself it was routine, a reminder, a question about a field trip form. Then it rang again. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway outside the administrative wing. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I answered. This is Rowan Whitmore. The voice on the other end was steady but tight. This is Elaine Porter from Bright Horizons. I'm calling regarding Caleb. My stomach dropped immediately. Is he hurt? No, she said quickly. He is safe, but there is a situation. She explained that Brenda had arrived at the front desk about 15 minutes earlier and requested to pick Caleb up early. She was not on the approved pickup list. We informed her that we could not release him without written authorization from you or Andrew, Elaine said. She is insisting she has the right as his grandmother. I leaned against the wall, pressing my palm flat against the cool paint. Did she say anything to him? There was a brief pause. He saw her through the front glass doors. He asked his teacher if he had to go with her. My breath caught. What did he say exactly? I asked. He said, "Do I have to go?" The hallway felt suddenly too narrow. I told Elaine that neither Andrew nor I had authorized any change in pickup arrangements. I told her clearly that Brenda was not to take Caleb under any circumstances. Elaine responded without hesitation. We will not release him. If she continues to refuse to leave, we may need to contact local police. I told her Andrew was on his way. When I called Andrew, he answered on the first ring. She's at the school, I said. His voice changed instantly. I'm leaving now. I drove straight from Edward Hospital toward downtown Naperville, my hands tight on the steering wheel. Every red light felt personal. When I pulled into the Bright Horizons parking lot, I saw Brenda's silver SUV parked near the entrance. The summer program occupied a renovated brick building with large glass windows facing the street. From outside, I could see children moving around inside, bright posters taped to the walls. Andrew's car was already there. I stepped inside to find Brenda standing at the reception desk, her purse clutched against her side. Her posture was rigid, chin lifted. Elaine Porter stood behind the desk, calm but immovable. Brenda was speaking loudly enough for anyone in the lobby to hear. He belongs with family, she was saying. I am his grandmother. Elaine's voice remained even. We have a strict pickup policy. Your name is not listed. We require written authorization from his parents. This is ridiculous, Brenda snapped. You are keeping a child from his own blood. From down the hallway, I saw Caleb standing just inside the doorway of one of the classrooms. A teacher knelt beside him, one hand resting lightly on his shoulder. He was staring toward the lobby, eyes wide. He looked smaller than he had that morning. Andrew stepped between Brenda and the desk. You need to leave, he said quietly. She turned on him, her expression a mix of indignation and disbelief. You would deny your own mother access to her grandson. Andrew did not raise his voice. You left him on a curb in a crowded parade. The words landed in the open space of the lobby. A few parents sitting along the wall shifted uncomfortably. Brenda's face flushed. That was an exaggeration, and you know it. Andrew shook his head once. It was not. Elaine stepped forward slightly. Mrs. Whitmore, if you do not leave voluntarily, we will contact the Naperville Police Department. We are obligated to maintain the safety of the children in our care. Brenda's eyes flicked toward the front doors, then back to Andrew. I have rights, she insisted. Illinois law recognizes grandparents. Elaine replied calmly. Grandparent visitation requires a court order. Do you have one? Brenda did not answer. Andrew held her gaze. You do not get to show up here and scare him. I walked down the hallway toward Caleb. As I approached, he whispered to his teacher, but his eyes stayed locked on the lobby. He asked her if he had to go with me, the teacher said softly. I told him no one is going anywhere without his parents' permission. I knelt in front of him. You do not have to go anywhere you do not want to go, I told him. His shoulders loosened slightly. From the lobby, Brenda's voice rose again. This is absurd. You are teaching him to reject family. Andrew responded in the same controlled tone he had used during the phone call weeks earlier. We are teaching him that he is safe. The silence that followed was sharp. Brenda looked around the room, perhaps realizing she had lost the audience she expected. Elaine's hand hovered near the phone on the desk. Finally, Brenda adjusted the strap of her purse. This is not over, she said. She walked out without another word. The door closed behind her with a muted click. The entire building seemed to exhale. Andrew stepped back toward the hallway and met my eyes. There was no triumph in his expression, only certainty. We thanked Elaine and the teacher. Elaine told us she would document the incident formally. She said they had security footage of the lobby and that any further attempts would be handled immediately. On the drive home, Caleb sat in the back seat between us. Was she mad? He asked quietly. No, Andrew said. She was told no. That answer satisfied him more than any explanation would have. That evening, Andrew forwarded Elaine's written summary of the incident to Claire Donnelly. Within an hour, Claire called. You need an official incident report filed with the school and a copy retained for your records. If she attempts to petition for visitation, this becomes relevant immediately. Andrew asked whether Brenda's appearance at the school could be considered harassment. It depends on frequency and behavior, but documentation is your strongest tool right now. After he ended the call, Andrew remained seated at the kitchen table, fingers laced together. We are done reacting. Now we move. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a lawnmower down the block. Upstairs, Caleb's door closed softly. Andrew reached for his laptop. We are done reacting. Now we move.
If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you.
Chapter 5. In Court. By early September, she made her move. Claire called us on a Thursday afternoon while I was finishing up discharge paperwork at the hospital. Her tone was professional, almost unsurprised. She filed, she said. Filed what? I asked, even though I already knew. Petition for grandparent visitation in DuPage County. I felt the air leave my lungs slowly, not in panic, but in recognition. Of course she had. Andrew took the call on speaker when I got home. Claire explained that Brenda was claiming we were unreasonably denying access and that Caleb had an established relationship with her prior to the conflict. Established relationship? Andrew repeated. Claire's voice remains calm. It is standard language. The question is whether a judge believes cutting contact harms the child. Andrew did not hesitate. It does not. The temporary hearing was scheduled 3 weeks later. Not a full trial, Claire explained, but enough to assess whether Brenda's petition had merit. In the days leading up to it, the house felt steady on the surface and tense underneath. Claire went to school, Andrew went to work. I handled my shifts, but everything carried an undercurrent of preparation. Claire asked us to compile documentation, photos from the parade, the incident summary from Bright Horizons, screenshots of Brenda's social media posts, a written statement detailing Caleb's reaction to both events. One evening, as we sat at the kitchen table reviewing the timeline, Caleb wandered in, clutching his math workbook. Are we in trouble? He asked. Andrew closed the folder immediately. No, he said. We are making sure everyone understands the rules. Caleb nodded slowly. Then he said something that settled deep in my chest. I do not want to go anywhere if she is mad. Andrew reached out and placed his hand over Caleb's smaller one. You are not going anywhere you do not want to go, he said. I promise. The morning of the hearing in late September 2024 was gray and cool. DuPage County Courthouse stood solid and impersonal against the sky. Brenda was already there when we arrived, sitting beside her attorney in the hallway outside the courtroom. She wore a navy blazer and pearls. She looked smaller than usual, but her chin was lifted high. When she saw Andrew, her eyes filled instantly with tears. "I never wanted it to come to this," she said. Andrew did not respond. Inside the courtroom, everything felt amplified. The scrape of chairs, the shuffle of papers, the low murmur of attorneys conferring. The judge, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a measured voice, called the case. Brenda's attorney spoke first. He described her as a devoted grandmother cut off without explanation. He suggested that Rowan had influenced Andrew's decision. He used the word alienating. I felt the word press against my ribs. Brenda dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Claire rose next. She did not dramatize anything. She laid out facts. She described the 4th of July parade. She referenced the police officer who approached Caleb. She submitted the Bright Horizons incident report. She noted that Brenda had appeared at the school without authorization and demanded access. Claire's tone never shifted, but the courtroom seemed to sharpen around her words. The judge leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said to Brenda, "is it accurate that you left the child unattended during a crowded public event?" Brenda hesitated. "He was not unattended," she replied quickly. "I could see him." The judge glanced at the documentation. "From nearly a block away, according to these statements." Brenda's attorney shifted beside her. "He was sitting down because he refused to walk," Brenda said. "He was being difficult." The judge's expression did not soften. "He was 8 years old," she said. Silence followed. Brenda attempted to redirect. She said she loved her grandson. She said she had always been present. She said cutting her off would harm him emotionally. Claire responded with one sentence that seemed to change the air. "The only documented emotional harm in this case resulted from Mrs. Whitmore's actions." The judge did not issue a final ruling that day. She ordered further review and encouraged mediation, but her tone had shifted from neutral to cautious. In the hallway afterward, Brenda's attorney approached her, speaking in a low voice. I could not hear the words, but I saw his expression tighten. He glanced briefly toward Andrew and then back at Brenda. 2 days later, Claire called again. "Her attorney contacted me," she said. "They are considering withdrawing the petition." Andrew's reaction was immediate. Why? Because if this proceeds, the 4th of July incident becomes part of a formal record. If a judge finds that she exercised poor judgment that endangered a child, it opens other doors, doors she likely does not want opened. "Child endangerment?" I said quietly. Claire paused. "Yes." A week later, the petition was formally withdrawn. There was no apology, no admission of wrongdoing, just paperwork filed quietly with the court. Andrew read the notice twice before setting it down. "It is not about winning," he said. "I know." But the tension did not dissolve. It redirected. While the visitation petition was unfolding, Andrew had already begun the adoption process. Marcus Bennett had signed termination of parental rights in 2022, but the formal stepfather adoption had never been completed. Now it moved forward with purpose. Background checks, fingerprinting at the local police station, a home study visit scheduled for early October. A social worker walked through our house, asked about discipline methods, asked about our support system, and asked Caleb how he felt about Andrew. Caleb answered simply, "He is my dad." The social worker smiled but kept writing. Caleb's 3rd grade teacher submitted a letter describing his progress, his kindness toward classmates, his improved confidence since summer ended. Claire guided us through every form, every signature, every waiting period required by Illinois law. One evening in late October, after Caleb had gone to bed, Andrew sat at the edge of his room watching him sleep. The hallway light cast a soft glow across the quilt at the foot of the bed. Andrew spoke without turning around. "I am not doing this because of her," he said. "I am doing this because I should have done it years ago." I sat beside him. "You are doing it because he deserves clarity." Andrew nodded. The next afternoon, he called Caleb into the living room. He did not make it ceremonial. He did not make it dramatic. He sat on the couch and motioned for Caleb to join him. "I am making this permanent," he said. Caleb looked confused at first. "Permanent how?" Andrew swallowed once. "I am finishing the paperwork to legally adopt you, so no one ever questions it again." Caleb's eyes widened slightly. "Like, for real?" "For real." There was a pause, a small space where everything that had happened over the past months seemed to hover in the air. Caleb leaned forward and wrapped his arms around Andrew. Andrew closed his eyes and held him there. From the doorway, I watched the two of them, aware that what we were building now had nothing to do with revenge. It had everything to do with protection. Chapter 6. Not Optional. By March 2025, winter had finally loosened its grip on DuPage County. The morning of the adoption hearing was cold but bright, sunlight reflecting off the courthouse steps in a way that made everything feel sharper, clearer. Caleb wore the blue button-down shirt we had bought for special occasions, the one he insisted made him look like a real grown-up. Andrew adjusted the collar once before we walked inside. The DuPage County Courthouse felt familiar by then, but different. The first time we had come, it carried tension and uncertainty. That morning, it carried something steadier. Caleb held Andrew's hand as we stepped through security. He did not seem nervous. He seemed focused. Inside the courtroom, everything was quiet and orderly. Claire Donnelly greeted us with a small smile. She had handled the paperwork, the home study, the background checks, the teacher's letter, every required form under Illinois law. There were no surprises left, only the formal step that would seal what had already been true in our home. Brenda was not there. She had not contested the adoption. After withdrawing her petition months earlier, she had grown quieter. There were no more public posts, no more attempts at school pickups. The silence was not reconciliation, it was distance. The judge entered, the same woman who had presided over the temporary hearing in September. She recognized us. Her expression was neutral but not unkind. Andrew stood beside Caleb as Claire presented the final documents. The judge asked a few procedural questions, confirming that Marcus Bennett's parental rights had been legally terminated in 2022, confirming that all statutory waiting periods had been satisfied, confirming that the home study recommended approval. Then she looked at Caleb. "Do you understand what is happening today?" she asked gently. Caleb straightened slightly. He glanced up at Andrew, then back at the judge. "It means he is my dad," he said. The judge smiled faintly. "And what does that mean to you?" There was a small pause, not long enough to feel awkward, but long enough for every memory of the past year to pass through my mind in a flash. The curb, the police officer, the words "too sensitive," the question, "do I have to go?" Caleb swallowed once. "It means I am not optional," he said. The words settled into the room. For a second, I could not see clearly. The edges of my vision blurred as that 4th of July afternoon replayed itself inside me. The way he had whispered that he always made drama, the way he had apologized for walking too slowly. Andrew's hand tightened around Caleb's. The judge nodded once, a subtle acknowledgement of something larger than paperwork. "Very well," she said. Andrew signed first. His signature was steady, deliberate. Caleb watched closely, as if memorizing the shape of the letters. Then I signed as a consenting parent. The judge stamped the final order. From this day forward, Andrew Whitmore is the legal father of Caleb Whitmore. It was simple, clinical, official, but nothing about it felt small. When the hearing concluded, Claire shook Andrew's hand. "Congratulations," she said. "This one feels good." Outside the courtroom, Andrew knelt in front of Caleb again, just as he had on that curb 8 months earlier. The difference was unmistakable. "It is done," Andrew said quietly. "For real?" Caleb asked again, almost smiling. "For real." Caleb did not cry. He wrapped his arms around Andrew's neck and held on for a few seconds longer than usual. Andrew closed his eyes and let him. We stepped out of the courthouse into the cool March air. The sky was pale blue, the last patches of snow melting into the grass along the sidewalk. There was no dramatic confrontation waiting outside, no final showdown. Brenda had chosen absence over escalation. Over the winter, I had heard through distant relatives that she stopped attending certain church gatherings, that some members of her social circle were uncomfortable with the public nature of the dispute, that she preferred not to discuss it. There was no collapse, no humiliation campaign, just a gradual loss of influence. Dennis had not reached out again. Sabrina had posted family photos that no longer included us. The circle had redrawn itself. I realized something as we walked down the courthouse steps. Revenge had never looked like shouting or public defeat. It looked like quiet paperwork and firm boundaries. It looked like a child who no longer asked if he had to go. Caleb slipped his hand into Andrew's again as we crossed the parking lot. "Can we get ice cream?" he asked. Andrew laughed softly. "I think that is mandatory after court." As we drove back through Naperville, the streets looked ordinary. Grocery stores, coffee shops, school buses idling at corners. The same town where, months earlier, my son had sat alone on a curb believing he was the problem. Now his name was legally bound to ours. That evening, we placed the official adoption order in a folder and set it in the top drawer of the desk in our living room. Andrew did not make a speech. He simply rested his hand on the folder for a moment before closing the drawer. Later, after Caleb went to bed, I stood in his doorway watching him sleep. The house was quiet, peaceful, in a way that felt earned. I thought about that word again, optional. How easily it had been handed to him, how quickly children internalize what adults throw carelessly in their direction. If you have ever been told you were too sensitive, too dramatic, too much, I want you to hear this clearly. You were not the problem. You were responding to something that hurt. And if you're raising a child now, especially one who feels deeply, protect that softness. The world will try to harden it soon enough. Sometimes protection doesn't look loud. It looks like paperwork. It looks like saying no. It looks like choosing your child even when it costs you comfort. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to draw a line to keep someone safe, stay with us. Share your thoughts. Let someone else know they are not alone. Because no child should grow up believing they are optional. When Caleb reached for Andrew's hand again as we stepped into the house that night, he did it without hesitation, and Andrew did not let go.